ever feel lost? Like, really lost?
Yeah.
Tonight we're going to tackle a question that's all about getting oriented. Literally in the vastness of space. Why can't you see Polaris, the North Star, from the Southern Hemisphere?
It seems like such a simple question, right? But it unlocks some really fascinating insights into not just astronomy, but how different people have interpreted the cosmos.
Like throughout history.
Throughout history, exactly.
And we've got sources that break down like the basic astronomy behind Polaris's visibility.
Yeah.
But then things take a turn for the unexpected.
Oh, really?
With alternative theories about Earth and the universe.
It's a chance to see how one simple observation of the night sky can spark completely different explanations.
Right.
Some grounded in science, others, well, let's just say they're a bit more imaginative.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine you're standing south of the equator. You're gazing up at a breathtaking sky full of stars. But Polaris is nowhere to be found.
What's going on here?
Yeah, what's the deal?
So it all comes down to Earth's shape and Polaris's unique position.
Okay.
If you picture Earth as a giant sphere, Polaris sits almost directly above the North Pole.
Okay.
So as you travel further south of the equator, Earth's curve blocks your view of Polaris.
So it's like trying to peek over the curve of a giant ball.
Exactly.
Unless you're standing way up north, Polaris is just hidden from view.
Yeah. It's similar to how you can't see a ship that has sailed over the horizon.
Right, yeah.
That curvature of the Earth gets in the way.
Makes sense. Okay, but one of our sources, Flat Earth Transcription, The Lost History of the Flat Earth, takes a totally different approach.
Okay.
They argue that the reason you can't see Polaris from the Southern Hemisphere is because our understanding of Earth is totally wrong.
Okay, so what do they think?
Well, this source proposes a model where the Earth is flat
Okay.
and enclosed by this dome-like structure. They call it the firmament.
Okay.
And in this model, the lack of Polaris visibility in the south isn't due to Earth's curvature. It's because the firmament is obscuring it.
Hold on, a dome. Like a giant snow globe.
I know, right?
That's a pretty different way to think about the Earth.
It is, and it gets even weirder. They go even further.
Oh, really?
This source claims that there's a giant map of the entire flat Earth imprinted on the surface of the moon.
What?
Reflected like a mirror for those who know how to look for it.
Wait, a map on the moon?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is there like any scientific basis for that?
Well, not really. What they're interpreting as a map is just a pattern of light and shadow.
Gotcha.
Created by the moon's surface features. It's like our brains are just looking for familiar patterns, even where they don't exist.
I see.
So no hidden continents on the moon. Kind of a bummer, but I get it.
So this source uses the moon map idea, along with the lack of Polaris visibility in the south, to say that we've been misled about the true nature of our world.
Exactly. So for them, the reason you can't see Polaris in the Southern Hemisphere is because there's this dome-like structure, the firmament hiding it from view.
And they're saying this is all part of like a bigger effort to hide the truth about a flat Earth.
Yes. It's definitely a fascinating, albeit unconventional perspective.
It is.
This source also dives deep into historical maps.
Okay.
Specifically how they've depicted the Earth differently over time, right?
Yeah, they bring up Hyperborea.
Right.
This legendary land from ancient Greek mythology.
Oh, wow.
And how its representation on old maps is kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
They say that these varying depictions just show how unreliable historical narratives about the Earth can be.
So they're basically saying like, hey, if maps from the past could be so wrong, maybe we're wrong about Earth's shape now too.
Right.
And maybe the inability to see Polaris in the south is part of that.
Yeah, they're drawing parallels between the evolution of maps and their belief that we've been misled about Earth.
Right. And they even bring up the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, claiming that these lines are out of sync with the precession of the equinoxes.
This is where it gets interesting. They argue that the sun's position relative to the constellations at the solstices has shifted over time due to Earth's wobble on its axis, which is called the precession of the equinoxes.
Right.
It does mean that the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn aren't aligned with the constellations that they were named after.
Thousands of years ago.
Yeah, thousands of years ago.
So it's like those tropic lines are like time travelers from a different astronomical era.
In a way, yeah. It's a reminder that the cosmos is constantly in motion.
Yeah.
Even on timescales that we don't usually think about.
But does this mean that like our entire understanding of astronomy is wrong?
Not at all. The precession of the equinoxes is a well-understood phenomenon in modern astronomy. It doesn't invalidate our current models.
Okay.
It just adds another layer of complexity.
Okay, so the tropic lines might be misnamed, but it's not evidence of a grand conspiracy or a flat Earth?
Exactly. But this source uses these seemingly out-of-place tropic lines to say that conventional wisdom about Earth and the cosmos is flawed.
Speaking of flawed, this source also gets into some pretty unconventional theories about energy and technology.
Really?
Yeah, they claim that a lost ancient civilization harnessed free energy from water and electromagnetism.
Okay.
So they argue that structures like cathedrals, mosques, even the Crystal Palace in London, were originally built as sophisticated energy harvesting devices.
Wait, are you telling me they think cathedrals were giant energy generators?
I know, right?
That's wild.
It is a bold claim.
Yeah.
They say that this lost civilization understood how to manipulate Earth's energy fields in ways that we're only just beginning to rediscover.
So instead of places of worship, they were actually giant power plants.
Basically. That's a pretty radical reinterpretation of history.
It is. They also argue that this ancient knowledge was deliberately suppressed and hidden from us by powerful forces.
A conspiracy to suppress free energy. Sounds like something out of sci-fi movie. But I have to admit, it's kind of a captivating thought.
It is. It taps into our fascination with lost civilizations and hidden knowledge.
Yeah.
And makes you think about the possibilities that exist beyond what we currently understand.
Okay, so we've got the official astronomical explanation for why you can't see Polaris from down south.
Right.
And we've explored an alternative theory that's a bit more outside the box.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, is there anything else from our sources about the North Star? And why you can only see it from certain parts of the world?
Yeah, there is. There's another fascinating source that talks about the history of space exploration and technology.
Okay.
It doesn't explicitly mention Polaris, but it helps to understand how our understanding of space has evolved.
Okay, perfect. Let's shift gears and explore that perspective.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mysteries of Polaris. So before we went to break, we were talking about how space exploration and technology have shaped our current understanding of the universe.
Right? Like, it's incredible to think about how far we've come from launching the first satellite to sending people to the moon, like in such a short amount of time.
Absolutely. And this source, The History of Space Exploration, a timeline, highlights how those advancements in technology, like powerful rockets and telescopes, have allowed us to study those distant planets and stars with incredible detail.
Yeah.
And this has helped refine our understanding of astronomy and confirm a lot of those scientific theories, including the shape of the Earth and the position of Polaris.
It's amazing how those space missions have really given us like concrete evidence to support the scientific explanation for why we can't see Polaris from the Southern Hemisphere. But as we see, not everyone accepts that explanation.
That's right. And this brings us back to our flat Earth source.
Right.
Remember how they claimed that ancient civilizations knew the truth about a flat Earth? Well, they go on to suggest that this knowledge wasn't just lost. It was actively suppressed and hidden from us.
So like a giant cover-up to keep us in the dark about the true nature of reality.
Exactly. They argue that this suppression has kept humanity trapped in a system of dependence on limited energy sources, preventing us from achieving our true potential.
So they're connecting the idea of a flat Earth to like a conspiracy about energy control. That's a pretty bold claim. What kind of evidence do they have to support this?
They point to existing structures, like cathedrals, mosques, even the Crystal Palace, as evidence of this ancient suppressed technology. They argue that these buildings were originally designed as sophisticated energy harvesting devices.
So instead of places of worship or grand architectural feats, they're looking at these structures as remnants of a lost civilization that knew how to harness free energy.
Precisely. They point to features like towers, domes, and intricate ornamentation, arguing that these weren't just for aesthetics, but played a functional role in harnessing and directing energy.
It's so fascinating how they're like reinterpreting these familiar landmarks through the lens of their theory.
Yeah.
Did they go into any specifics about how this energy harvesting was supposed to work?
They do. They claim that this lost civilization understood the power of water and sound. Using a vast network of canals, reservoirs, and other water-based systems as part of their energy grid.
So they're saying that structures like castle moats and aqueducts weren't just for defense or water transport, but they were actually part of this sophisticated energy system.
Exactly. And they even suggest that the placement and design of organs and bells in cathedrals were intentionally chosen to create specific frequencies and vibrations that would influence the energy grid.
Makes you wonder if they're onto something, even if it sounds a bit far-fetched.
Yeah.
But again, is there any real scientific evidence to support these claims?
While these ancient structures are definitely impressive feats of engineering, there's no scientific basis for the claim that they were used to harness free energy in the way this source describes.
Right.
It's more of an imaginative interpretation of history and architecture.
Right. It's important to keep that in mind. But it's also interesting to see how these alternative theories can make us question our assumptions and look at the world from a different perspective.
Absolutely. Speaking of questioning assumptions, this source also delves into a topic that often sparks debate: the Apollo moon landings.
Oh, this should be interesting. Are they suggesting that the moon landings were faked?
The source we have, The Moon Landing World's Greatest Hoax, free documentary history, explores the claims made by those who believe the moon landings were staged. They highlight various arguments, from the lack of stars in photographs to the alleged impossibility of surviving Earth's radiation belts.
So, like, they're bringing up some of the classic conspiracy theory talking points. Do they offer, like, any new evidence or insights?
Not really. The source primarily rehashes common conspiracy theories about the moon landings, questioning the technology at the time and suggesting that filmmaker Stanley Kubrick might have been involved in staging the footage.
So more speculation than substance.
In a way, yes. It's a reminder that even with a lot of evidence, some people will choose to believe alternative narratives.
Do they at least acknowledge any of the evidence that supports the authenticity of the moon landings?
They do mention counter-arguments from experts.
Right.
Like the existence of lunar rocks brought back from the missions,
Right.
satellite imagery of the landing sites, and corroboration from other countries that tracked the Apollo missions.
Okay, so at least they're presenting both sides of the story, even if their focus seems to be on the conspiracy theories.
That's right. And it's important to remember that scientific understanding is built on evidence and testing.
Right.
The Apollo missions represent a remarkable achievement in human history and a huge milestone in our exploration of space.
Well said. But it's also really interesting to see how events like the moon landings can become like fertile ground for conspiracy theories and alternative interpretations.
Absolutely. It highlights the power of skepticism and the importance of thinking critically when we're evaluating information, especially in today's world with so much misinformation.
Now, before we get too lost in the world of moon landing conspiracies, I want to circle back to our main topic, Polaris.
Okay.
We've talked about the scientific explanation for its limited visibility and explored some unconventional theories. What else can we learn about the North Star from our sources?
Well, we have another source that gives some historical context about the early days of space exploration and NASA's origins.
Interesting. How does NASA's founding relate to our discussion about Polaris?
Well, this source doesn't directly mention Polaris, but it does give some insight into the broader context of space exploration and the political climate that led to the creation of NASA. It talks about the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, the race to space, and the pivotal role of figures like Wernher von Braun.
Ah, Wernher von Braun, the German rocket scientist who played a key role in developing the rockets that launched the Apollo missions. Didn't he have a controversial past?
He did. The source acknowledges von Braun's involvement with the Nazi regime during World War II. It highlights the complex ethical questions that can come up when scientific advancements are tied to political ideologies.
It's a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge and technological progress isn't happening in a vacuum. You know, it's always shaped by the historical and political forces at play.
Exactly. And understanding those forces can help us to better evaluate the information we get about space exploration and the universe as a whole.
That's a great point. So we've covered quite a bit of ground here.
We have.
We've explored the science behind Polaris's visibility, delved into some alternative theories, and even touched on the history of space exploration and the moon landings. But there's still so much more to uncover about the North Star, right?
Absolutely. For instance, we have another source that explores the cultural significance of Polaris and its role as a symbol in a lot of different traditions.
Perfect. Let's dive into that. Welcome back. It's amazing how a simple question like, why can't we see Polaris from certain parts of the world, has taken us down so many different paths.
It really shows how one observation of the night sky can spark so many different interpretations and theories.
Before we wrap up, I want to explore the cultural side of Polaris.
Okay.
We have a source titled Pasted Text that looks at how Polaris has been viewed throughout history.
Right. This source goes into this symbolism of Polaris, especially in esoteric traditions.
Okay.
Polaris has often been seen as a symbol of stability and guidance.
I can see why. It's like this fixed point in the sky, you know, in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
A constant presence, while everything else seems to revolve around it.
Exactly. Many cultures viewed Polaris as like a celestial anchor, a connection to the divine.
Right.
And this source contrasts that with the Southern Hemisphere, where you don't have that same prominent fixed star.
So they're suggesting that the absence of Polaris in the Southern Hemisphere could have led to different cultural interpretations of the cosmos.
That's right. While the North might focus on Polaris as a symbol of stability, the South might connect to other constellations, like the Southern Cross for guidance.
Right.
It's fascinating how our physical location on Earth can shape how we see the universe.
It's a reminder that astronomy isn't just about, like, the science of stars and planets.
Right.
But also the stories we tell about them and the meanings we find in them.
Absolutely. And we've seen that throughout our deep dive.
Yeah.
We started with the scientific explanation for why you can't see Polaris from the south. But we've also looked at alternative theories, cultural interpretations, and even conspiracy theories.
It's been quite a journey. And speaking of journeys,
I
remember our Flat Earth source, Flat Earth Transcription, The Lost History of the Flat Earth, had some interesting things to say about time and this idea of silent warfare.
Yes. They argue that the way that we measure time with clocks and calendars is a form of control, imposing a linear structure on our experience of reality.
Okay, so they're suggesting that instead of time flowing naturally, it's like being chopped up and manipulated as part of a larger agenda.
That's their claim. They even say that ancient civilizations understood time as cyclical, a knowledge that's been suppressed to keep us from breaking free from this artificial system.
It's kind of a heady concept, the idea that time itself could be like a weapon.
It is. And while there's no scientific evidence to support these claims, it raises interesting questions about how we think about time.
And how it shapes our reality.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've successfully unpacked a few mysteries tonight, even if we haven't solved them all. What are your final thoughts on this deep dive into Polaris?
I think what's fascinating is how one observation from the Southern Hemisphere can lead to such a wide range of interpretations, from scientific explanations to conspiracy theories to cultural stories.
It just shows how our curiosity about the universe can take us down so many different paths, each with its own perspective and insights.
And even though we might not agree with all of the interpretations, it's that process of exploration, questioning, and thinking critically that's important.
So next time you find yourself looking up at the night sky, remember that every star has a story to tell, a mystery to unravel, and it has the potential to spark our imagination.
And who knows, maybe those stars are looking back at us, wondering about the stories we tell about them and our journeys to understand the universe.
That's a great thought to end on. Until next time, keep looking up and keep exploring.